Welcome everybody, my name's Jono.
My name's Nathan.
And we're from Glenmore Park Anglican Church. We're starting up a little series of podcasts called Just Ask. We're going to be asking questions about topical things that we think are worth thinking about. Today we're going to be talking about something, we're going to title it, Bad is the New Good. Helping us think about these things today is Craig Hamilton. Hey Craig.
Hey.
Craig works at our church. We're also going to be talking to Anthony Gerber, who also works at our church. Hey Anthony.
Hey.
We're going to kick it off with a few questions, aren't we, Nath?
Yeah, we have a few, I think, really good ones here. What do people think that sin is?
I think when some people hear us say sin, they think we mean breaking commandments, that God has rules, a whole bunch of rules, and that when you sin is when you break those rules. And that's all sin is.
Yeah, right. Do you have anything to add to that, Anthony?
Yeah, I think we tend to think of sin as a religious term.
Yeah.
Although I do remember seeing they had all those ice creams. Remember the 7 deadly sins? So I think sometimes we don't know what to do with the category of sin.
Yeah.
We roughly know it's things like murder, stealing, lying, cheating, connected to morality, but it's more those things that we do that we think are wrong.
Yeah, right. Like, what do people think about what Christians and the church thinks about sin?
They often think that we're just wanting to be killjoys, so just stop people having fun, and so we label things sin because that will then stop us, stop people from doing it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think too, it's all the things that are ultra fun. And if we label them sin, it just makes them more enticing, more fun to do. Like getting heaps drunk or having lots of sex, that if we say that that's sin, well, that's all the fun stuff. And even it being called sin just makes it even more fun.
Yeah, right. So what does the Bible say about sin?
I think the way that the Bible talks about it is that it's a relational category. It's about us and our relationship with God as people. And in particular, that it's a relationship where we're antagonistic against Him. We don't want Him around. We don't like Him sticking His nose in our life. That we want Him. He's fine to be God and live in heaven, but He has to keep out of our life and what we do. We reject Him in the way we live our lives. Maybe we do it really overtly and consciously and say explicitly, God, I don't want you around. But I think often we do it more implicitly. We don't even mean to do it. We just reject Him, don't even think about Him, aren't even concerned about Him. But in the way we live, it's a rejection of Him.
Right.
Which shows that sin is deeper than just what we do. Mm-hmm. And whether we're doing right or doing wrong, it's more about our attitude towards God, which then might spill over into how we live. But I often think the key question on, what is sin is who has the final say in how I live my life? Am I having the final say, or am I giving it to God?
Mm. And I think too, the other thing to say is we all have this antagonism towards God, or this rejection of Him, whether we're churchy people, whether we've never been to a church before, or we're a different religion, or we're no religion, or we're just a good person. All of us, deep inside, have a rejection of God, no matter who we are or where we've come from.
Mm.
So you're saying, even someone's, lovely old grandma who, never does anything, majorly wrong in her life, still has, the sin problem?
Yes, that it's a problem for all people, even people who are super good and super nice and do a lot of good things, they still have a sin problem.
So, what actually is sin? Can you explain what it is when we are sinning?
I mean, for example, let me use an example from my marriage. I'm married to Katie, have been for 15 years, and what I do for her is a result of how I feel towards her, how I view her. Do I value her or do I not value her? And I think it's the same with God. In the way in which we live, the way in which we live says, I value God or I don't value God.
And I think too, the way that then plays out in our lives is, as we reject God, we try and find something else to replace him with. And that can mean sometimes that it's another person that we replace him with and make them the be-all and end-all of our lives. Sometimes it's like an obsession that we would have. Sometimes it is, say, drinking or sex. Not that those things are bad in themselves, but as they come to replace God in our lives, they become bad things. And I think, so that's sometimes how sin plays itself out. It takes things that are good things and makes them God things, and they become a bad thing.
So, do you guys think God gets offended by our sin?
Yeah, I think he does. I think when we sin against people, because I guess the other thing about sin is it is to do with our relationship towards God, but as it plays out in real life, it impacts other people. So I sin against people. So I'll sin against you, like I'll be angry at you. And so because God loves people, because God loves you, if I hurt you, steal from you, then that matters to him because he cares about you. And in the same way, if I treat myself poorly in the way that I act towards myself, think about myself, if I'm hateful towards myself and self-destructive and all that kind of thing, then he cares about that too, because he cares about me and how things go for me. And so, yeah, when we sin against, whether it's against other people or against ourselves, God cares about that because he cares about people. And also, I think it's worth saying too that when we have treated him and rejected him in our lives, that of course that would be offensive, particularly if he deserves to have a part in our life. That if we reject him and say he doesn't matter or we don't want him around, that there are consequences for that.
What are some of the consequences of sin and of breaking that relationship with God? Can you spell some of those out?
Yeah, I think there are consequences, and there's lots of ways to think about it. One way is that when you do something against a person, say you punch, if I was to punch Jono, then that's bad.
It is bad.
Yeah, and we would all agree on that.
Yeah.
But if I was to, say, punch a policeman, there might be something about that that's fun, but that's much worse, right? I'll get in much more trouble punching a policeman than punching Jono, even though I've done the exact same physical activity. And then if I was to punch, say, Julia Gillard, the Prime Minister, it's the same action, although the consequences for that will be much worse. And the reason why the consequences are worse, even though I'm doing the same physical action, is because of the greatness of the person. And so if God is real, and if he is of infinite greatness, which I think he is, then the action that I do against him is infinitely bad. And so therefore, if I've done something that's infinitely bad, then it requires an infinite punishment.
Okay, so how do we avoid those consequences?
Such a good question, because we all do desire to avoid such negative consequences. I suspect what we all naturally think is, well, to avoid it, I've got to be better. I've got to stop sinning, I've got to start doing good, I've got to be a better person. The thing is that we've already offended God. That has already happened, and the consequence is already there, sitting there on our, on our ledger, if you like. So we can't just start doing good and things will be all right. What the Bible is just so clear on, and I think this is what people miss about Christianity, is that the solution, the answer to avoiding the consequences, rests entirely on the shoulders of Jesus. He came into the world to save sinners. He came not to judge them, he came to save them. And he didn't come to save the good people, he came to save sinners. And so to avoid the consequences, we come to him. We need to know him and find our sin dealt with in him. The continual phrase is that Christ died for us. He died for sin.
And in the same way, if you try to avoid the consequences by doing something yourself, you're just doing more of the bad things that you were doing before, leaving God out of it, rejecting Him, and trying to do things your own way. It doesn't actually solve the problem. If the problem is that I've rejected God and try to do things my own way, then the solution can't be reject Him and try and solve this my own way. The solution has to be, well, what is God's solution to the problem? And the solution is Jesus.
So if that's true, isn't life as a Christian just life without all of the fun stuff?
It can, I think, from the outside look a bit like that when you first look at it. But I think what I would want to say is when you live life the way that God has designed it to be lived, it is actually more fun and it's actually better than living it your own way. And there is something that Christianity has to offer in maybe there is another way that may actually be more fun.
And I mean, what you've done there is you've lifted the lid on an assumption in the question, which is that all sin is fun.
And that's not to say that like everyone who isn't a Christian leads like a horrible life of hurting and hating and punching people.
Yeah.
But, just to say that when people live a life that doesn't involve hurting people, punching people, they're living the life that God has designed people to live. I guess that's what we're saying, not that only Christians do nice things.
No worries. Thanks heaps, guys, for your thoughts there. That was great. Look, you can ask questions about the things that we've talked about if you like. There's a website, www.justaskgpac.com. The GPAC part of that address is GPAC. Justaskgpac.com. And you can hit us up with any of those questions. Thanks, Craig.
Thank you.
Thank you, Anthony.
Welcome.
AKA Gerbs. And we'll hear from you next time.
Cool. Thank
Bye.
you.